So everybody's been talking a lot about World War III lately, and I wanted to go and do like run through about like I'm gonna focus more on some areas. Of course, for example, China is super important, but I'm not gonna focus on it as much as probably it deserves because it's less of my expertise area, but I will touch on it. Hey everybody. All right. Hey Middle East witnesses here. I'm saying hello. Hi Oja, how are you? I see who's here. All right, let's chat. As weird as it is chatting by myself in my room. So right now I should have really thought about where to start. Maybe a rundown a little bit of the current situation that we have in the Middle East. That's what everybody's focusing on. So yesterday night we had a situationship that I can tell from people who work in, for example, Israeli intelligence, even though they haven't clues about what's going to happen, they couldn't believe that Iran actually gonna go for it unless like they were prepared, right? But the whole system was like seriously like still surprised that this is what Iran chose to do. And maybe this is would be an interesting place to start because I want to talk about why what Iran did was a little bit of a weird choice. But this is what's fun about geopolitics and about I love those watching those analysts, and I think it's something that especially people from the United States tend to fall into, is that they apply too much logic to what's going to happen. And what's fun with doing an analysis when it comes to geopolitics is that human stupidity, dumbness, and complete craziness is a really, really, really interesting, like huge factor, decisive factor about what's going to happen. Because a lot of times that doesn't make sense at all. So yeah, so we had that situationship when Iran decided to go and basically bombard Israel in an unprecedented way, first time in history that missiles were sent in that many missiles at one go, as with the drones and ballistic missiles and also water, like from forgot. I'm sorry. I'll just keep that technical parts. I should have worked on my technical English before going into that exactly. But basically, all types of missiles that you can imagine, included through the water. And Israel was, of course, thinking the whole time, well, is it like the whole time it was like, when you sit in the bunker and you make decisions, you're like, yeah, that wouldn't make sense at all to do something like that, but you have to be prepared for any situation. And for Israel, I'm gonna run through a little bit on the defensive systems Israel has. Yeah, guys, like this video. Like, share, comment, bring people, be like, come on, there's gonna be a run through on geopolitics. And I'm starting with Iran because I think this is something that a lot of people um, yeah, I'm gonna touch on what Israel can do to respond and what it should do it with Iran. But I did name it like current like geopolitical analysis because I do want to touch on some basics. And I don't want to focus just on Israel and Iran because I think people get confused. And when they look at things in that microcosmos, right, like this regional Middle Eastern lens, they miss out so much about what's happening. For example, I think for many in the United States, they don't understand why the United States is siding with Israel, for example, or they don't understand all the aspects of why America invests money on Israeli weapon development industries, as well as just, you know, F-35 purchase deals and things like that. Because this is, first of all, let me start there. I want to say something about that. The Middle Eastern conflict, the Iran-Israel conflict, everything around it and the way it's described, it's where the governments want most people to focus and think about, and they don't want to project to the majority of the like for the major population, for most of people, they don't really want to tell the whole story there, because they don't want their own populations to panic. And then this focus, really big focus on what's going on in Israel, is not for nothing. There is a really good reason why the West focuses on Israel that much, and it's a kind of a double-edged game. One, they really need Israel, depend on Israel in ways that most people cannot even fathom, including a lot of Israelis that don't think about the large-scale implications that Israel has on the world, because of several things that put Israel in the forefront in a much larger scale geopolitical movements. And the other thing is that they like focusing on Israel, so it would be easier to hide the large scale of this conflict. So this Israel thing is like Israel, in a way, which is very, puts Israel in a special position, is that both the Muslim world and the Western world uses Israel to deflect the attention of the population from inner problems and also larger geopolitical problems they don't want their population to focus on. So, so Israel there is a reason that why there is so much focus on Israel, and then there is a reason that when push came to shove, that suddenly the UK, the France, Jordan, Saudi, and United States came and actually showed that coalition with Israel after 6 months of basically bashing Israel, saying how Israel is doing the worst thing ever, both in the UK and in France, completely like distorting reality in all their medias. BBC, if I'm not wrong, is also financed, for example, by the UK government. But then that country that is supposedly committing a genocide, if you listen to the BBC, that is funded by the UK government, suddenly the government that is also that media outlet is also participating so closely with the country that supposedly is genociding to this incredible like army drill. So how does those European leaders handle those two? That's one thing that really is like, it's a split personality. I know how to explain it, because there is the reality and things that leaders have to do, and there is public opinion, and public opinion is a completely different kind of war. So the governments and the leaders in all those countries, they want to win. On one hand, they want to pretend to bash Israel as much as they can, because it's an easy fight on a public. It's an easy front to put in front of your own people, so that they would support your government, support what you're doing. Especially, for example, to Saudi Arabia, that is a religious Muslim. Not as the government tries to get away from being religious, but the people are still religious. Also the king is still religious. I think MBS didn't inherit him yet. But also in the West, where the population is very affected by the views they get, and the Western population, their thing is that not that they are ideological anything, their problem is the lack of ideology and the lack of understanding of their lack of ideological thinking limit the way they view the world. So what happens in the West is that they're relatively secular, relatively they're like in their mental kind of thinking is that they are beyond, like they're past the stage of where the ideological fight would make you do something incredibly bad or things like that. And then it's easier to fool those Western populations in believing that the way Israel responds is excessive and it makes it very unpopular. But it's also because they really don't understand what it means to fight an ideology. A lot of people don't understand how far people would go for ideology, that people would starve, that people would risk their children, that people would do things that are completely against logic if they are driven by ideology. And this is something I want to stress. I don't know how many of you read the book Man's Search for Meaning, or how many are here are familiar with Maslow map of needs, right? The pyramid of needs. But what the Holocaust taught psychologists and psychiatrists is that the self-actualization part is actually a much lower need than Maslow hierarchy of needs. That then you have like food, and then you have shelter and like feeling of security and love and things like that, and recreational. Then you have like at the top self-actualization. But in reality, people need meaning. People need something to believe in, and it's just as important, maybe, I don't know if more or less, is as almost as important as food to have that part. And as much as security is important and everything like that, people that eat and have temporary security sometimes cannot perceive theoretical, let's say, theoretical loss of security, theoretical loss, like things that are more theoretical, they don't always manage to perceive that. And even then, humans are, we survived a long evolution, and we're very flexible in what we can tolerate. So ideology can really, really do a lot in what people decide to do. So, so Israel is in the middle between a world that is ideologically driven and a world that is just let us be, let us live, let us just enjoy life and work and things like that kind of driven. And those kind of mentalities are super different. And the language that Israel has to display the exact opposite towards, if they look east and south, they have to display one kind of personality. And if they look west, they have to display a completely different kind of personality, which is also problematic. It's also very hard to do on a PR standpoint. Jerusalem is the center of the world. Israel, yes, Israel is also geographically in a very, very volatile, important location, being technically a meeting point between three continents, Africa, Asia, and Europe. even though it's Eurasia. But there is a very, very big difference between what is Europe and what is Asia. And I want to touch on that because that's really, really important. Another thing that is different between the West and the East is just look at this map. Look at Europe and then look at the Middle East. What's the difference? Okay, I'm gonna wait to see. What do you guys think is the biggest difference between the Middle East and Europe? Green and brown. The Europeans, and also, by the way, look at Japan and South Korea and Russia and China, where people live. When they ended World War II, when they decided on this progressive new world order, where you have those borders that are decisive and are understood, they all live in areas that have not just that they have water, they're also close to water. So this is two things that Europe has a huge advantage on. And I'm gonna go to the Americas later because I wanna focus on the old world first. You have to understand that Europe didn't become this Western stronghold for nothing. It has two big advantages that is actually the same word, water. They have lots of seashore. That is advantage number one. And the second advantage is that they have water to drink. And and then when you have that, you have a lot of flexibility. You have a lot of flexibility that the Middle East doesn't have. And you have the ability to expand and to trade and to do a lot more. So think about, for example, the situation in Egypt, right? So you have 100 million people that live here and are basically living off this one river, which is the Nile. And for a long time, you had a population size that fit the ability of the Nile to provide water. Now you put borders in this country, and you have the effects of global warming, and also there is a dam that here that actually Ethiopia built, also that is in the start of the where the Nile goes. And basically that Nile is not as fertile, doesn't have as much water as it used to, because the other fast growing population that needs water is the countries in Africa. And then you have this peculiar situation. For a long time, the Egypt, the birth rate was high, but they did two things that is very not popular way of acting in the West, which is getting rid of a certain gender when they're born, and also only a few even survived. Yeah, well, Eastern Europe has its own problems. And now, after World War II, those countries that won, or the European countries that started that, came up with this amazing idea. If we put borders, there is no need for war. We just agree on who's living where, and everything's gonna be fine. We do not expand countries anymore. We don't change territory anymore. We don't do all those things, right? A very, 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 very privileged thing to state, living in an area that every country has water, let's say it like that, and has access to water or access to seas, versus a country that Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Iran as well has a really big problem with water right now. and also different growth size exactly. So right now we for let's say less than 100 years after World War II, the countries kind of could have like they didn't have a choice, right? They didn't have a choice after World War II. All those great powers have decided they don't want to fight anymore, and they decided to put on those borders. And of course, in the Middle East, the borders weren't even drawn by geographical and also not by reality. They were drawn artificially in many cases. And the Middle East is put as like, all right, Europe, you guys are amazing. You fought each other ideologically for hundreds of years. Now you're a little bit more stable, but none of you even have that thing where you might dry out and basically be thirsty. And then, uh, and yes, and then there is the cultural issues, and there are many, many other issues. So that is the kind of reality that brings about, let's say, two types of cultures. The very, very productive, innovative cultures, or on the other hand, the Amalekites, okay, the Amalek type people. That's another option. And so here you can say, for example, okay, Egypt, okay, so it's drying out of water, but it has access to the sea. And with today's technology and everything like that, then you can just put desalination plants and get your water supplied like that, which is what Israel is doing. Israel is almost 100% just using seawater. But then it comes to other things. Can that country manage itself? How is it structured? How is it built? How corrupt it is? And this combination of rough technical is not sustainable. Desalination. It's interesting. Desalination is not sustainable based on what I studied when I was in Israel. It's a technology that improves all the time. It's not the only thing Israel does. It also has it also recycles its water. The highest percentage by far of recycled water is in Israel. But all those things, all those projects, they require a lot of work. It's not easy. It's you have to be on the forefront of technology. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going into that. I'll try to, okay, wrap it up, or I'll wrap it up. The other thing is like, okay, so you have like borders that are kind of artificial, and then very hard water problems that are in the Middle East, and that is a very dry area and a very hot, rapidly growing population that is on average not very educated. And there is an ideological factor, which is important. So when you, you're not dumb. So this is something like I want to put those things on the table just because there is also like a reason different cultures develop in different places. And then, of course, the Europe that has so much touching surface with water has a great advantage when it came to, first of all, traveling the rest of the world using boats, right? And then with trade, it's a lot easier to, if you have such, and then it's water and water, you have both your water around you And you have rivers that you can use inside of Europe to have that that you can use to basically ship whatever you need. Interestingly enough, for example, Mongolia managed to grow its empire super fast because it also brought a new technological development that didn't exist in the rest of the world, which is, of course, very fast horses. And this is how they also expanded really, really fast through land. But no. But yeah, that didn't last too long. All right, so you have that starting point because I think geography is something that is sometimes very overlooked at when people try to understand what's driving World War III, what would drive World War III. You have to think also about the fact that you have different populations that grow in different paces. You have countries that the population is declining, yet they sit on a very, very fertile land. On the other hand, you have countries that with a very rapidly growing population that sit on a very arid um, on a very arid land, and that is also something that's bringing instability. There is something there that is unstable. Just imagine an hypothetical situation when you have two countries next to each other. One country, same size. One country, by the way, here's two countries like that, same size, Oman and Yemen. I think Yemen has like 4 million people versus Yemen that has like 10 times as much at least. Well, I want to kind of check like how much Yemen and those two countries they don't necessarily need like Oman is very arid itself. It's not like necessarily means that it has what Yemen would need. But let me see how many people. Right, so 34 million in Yemen versus Oman. Oh, Oman has 4.5 million. And you can see those are like basically the same size. And then somebody somewhere decided that those are the borders and that's it. And then you have a situation where this population really, really outgrows their resources and that population doesn't. So how long can those borders really be effective? That's a question. And then we have the thing that it brought. The thing that it brought is globalism, right? No borders. Everybody can theoretically move wherever they want. This is what something that when the Syrian civil war happened, where people were like, Europe was like, hey, we don't have enough people don't give enough birth. Syria, they were fighting. Don't get me wrong, but like the Syrian civil war had a lot to do with water, not just ideology, also water. They were the most fearsome fights, like the most fearsome collision points were where water was. And what then the logical thing was like, okay, Syria definitely outgrew the land in when the Syria was founded, it was at 4 million people, and then when the conflict started, when the civil war started, it had like 10 times more people, something like that. And then those were years with severe drought. Those were years with severe drought. And they fought over water. The resource of water was also a huge driver to everything that happened. First of all, the reason why you have those protests, right? You have to have unemployed people that have free time and are kind of bored, and they are obviously unhappy. And a higher unemployment rate can bring more protests. And what happened in Syria before the war, for example, was that with this severe drought, a lot of people that were doing agriculture couldn't do agriculture anymore, had to move to the cities, couldn't find work in the cities. And then those riots and everything like that really went full on. And that combining with the fact that you have a dictatorship that is also very and was never nice. You know, the Alawites, the Assad family that controls Syria, now the Damascus area, it's not a country anymore. The reason they got to power is that in Syria, the job of becoming a soldier was considered a very unwanted job. So the only ones that were lowly enough in their social status to join the army were the Alawites that live around here. They live on the shores of Syria. And they joined the army, and by being the majority in the army, even though they are a minority in their country, managed to take over the country. So Hafez al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, took over Syria by through the army. And so you have this combination where you have this dictatorship that is a dictatorship that comes from a minority that has also a little bit of a vengefulness towards their own people. It's not for nothing that the Assad regime had the ability to chemically weapon their own people. This is not love. This is not unity. This is nothing like that. And and yeah, so and then Obama was like, awesome, let's get rid of the dictatorship. And of course that brought up ISIS, and ISIS was very comfortable thing for Iran, because the existence of ISIS, a power like ISIS, actually was an excuse for Iran to start building Shia militias. So they had the Shia militia that they supported, like in the form of Hezbollah, but in Iraq, and why Iran is currently controlling Iraq, is when this ISIS thing happened, and there was this weird coalition between the Shia and the Americans to fight ISIS. Then Iran was like, here's an opportunity to build Shia militias. And after, of course, the Americans and the fight with ISIS was kind of over, the Iranians could have taken Iraq pretty easily. So you have the Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. That became one territorial, continuous territorial sphere of influence, let's say like that. And there is a reason, I don't know if you saw, when you had those countries colored versus Israel, when Jordan and Saudi Arabia joined the Israeli side. And this is where I started talking, and I said, okay, from before I was talking about a lot also about geography, but when even in Syria, I already started touching about ideological views and ethnicity that is also a permanent thing in the area. Thank you, Mr. Nokia. We Palestinian people don't afraid from death. Thank you for proving my point. You guys, let me see here. Here is it. Austria and Slovakia have the largest emergency water reserves in Europe and work together despite the bad history between them in the past. Also, the Mongols with Marco Polo inspired Columbus to explore. That's yeah, that is cool. I also want to say something about the fact that we have to also understand like that nothing can be taken for granted. The first civilizations, were like 4,000 years ago, started around, if I'm not wrong, around here. The first civilization, I think it was around here. It wasn't that long ago. So yeah, another thing, like for example, with the Arab expansion, the way they did it was really breaking the mold, and one of the reasons they really succeeded with this Muslim ideological reason of expansion that really broke the mold is because it was something new, this ideology of taking over the world just for the sake of it, right? So the Islam, the new ideology that it brought to the world. So, for example, Rome, the population grew, and they needed more and more areas to grow wheat in. So that was what triggered their expansion, right? So they just wanted to feed their people. Others were like same, the main driver would be to bring resources to your kingdom. That's why you would expand. Islam did something different. It didn't take anything back to Saudi Arabia. It was an ideological expansion, which brought something completely new to the table. It was like, wait, it's not necessarily the resources and then bringing back resources to the command center. No, it was we gonna expand for the sake of it. And I also want to touch on the fact that for the Arab tribes, first of all, what is Arab? Arab are desert people. Muhammad was not an Arab. If you ask Muhammad if he's an Arab, he's probably going to say that he's not an Arab. Arabs were the people of the desert that lived off mainly looting. Islam wasn't like the only first ideological expansion. I would say maybe Christianity is kind of like that too, like Christianity ideologically expanded, but on a very different kind of way. All right, let me go back. So let's go back to, I think, more modern times. So we have okay. So I wanted to talk about the Arabs for a reason, right? The Arabs themselves, the people that Muhammad controlled, weren't the Medina people, right? The Medina, when it was controlled by mostly Jews, it was like a little paradise. It was very technological, probably very technologically advanced. They had water solutions. They had a lot of things. The Arabs, on the other hand, those tribes, and like the Bedouins today, move from place to place and then graze with their herds, and also do a lot of looting in order to survive. And the thing and in Islam, the problem, one of the biggest things that is I found, like when I learned it about Islam, I was like, okay, that one is very, very problematic, but people don't talk about it, but they enough, if you ask me, is that agriculture is haram. So everything that is based on staying in one place and finding solutions so that you can stay in just one place is not very Muslim in its nature. So the other problem that we have is a very cultural problem. And that cultural problem developed gradually. It wasn't right away. It's not that when the Islamic expansion, that when they took over Iran or Iraq or Syria or Libya or Morocco, that the people that lived there adopted that mentality. it took time for that mentality to sink in. And the mentality is the mentality of Arab mentality. Maybe I should. It's like it's double meaning right now because Arab originally was specific kind of people. Arab now is the whole like Arabic language. People speak Arabic. How do I say it? Pull it like something that is. It's the mentality that you don't work for what you want. You take what you want. Basically, that kind of mentality. But it's not the only time this kind of mentality developed, because another type of mentality that has the same kind of thinking, and wherever they went, the first thing they did is basically getting rid of all the productivity. That's communism, right? But also in communism, that mentality was adopted to different extent in different places, right? So in Russia, it was adopted, but they also had that mentality that they really want to bring literacy to the whole country, and they really did like emphasize like trying to be industrious. The problem is that when everybody gets the same thing, no matter what they do, there is no reason to work hard. So this is something that, and another ideology that has this sort of mentality is communism. So those are the two ideologies that have Islam and communism. So communism is maybe is interesting because this is the question, for example, with China and with Russia, right? So part of communism is to expand this whole communistic ideology to the whole world. This is also part of communism. Just like Islam. Islam also believes that you have to expand Islam to the whole world and everybody has to be Muslim. Except it still has some differences. And here's the big questions, right? Once a country is being infested by Islam or communism, how much do they want to expand? Because in theory, both ideologies want to expand. Yes, the Mongols also had Arab mentality. And then there is another third very important aspect, which is ego. So you have geography, ideology, and then ego that really, really drives things. Not always in a logical way, which is, for me, is important to understand. Like in geopolitics, it's important to understand the logic, but also the things that are not logical. By the way, geography is somewhere in the middle. The reason I say it's somewhere in the middle is because geography also depends on the nation and how creative they are, and how resourceful they are, and how they manage themselves. It has a lot to do with it. So for Russia and China grew out of the how is it called, like Kesarut, like kingdom, but more than kingdom. Guys, help me a little bit with that. Basically, both look at themselves as an empire, right? And both kind of took the Mongol mentality of trying to expand and trying to be as big as possible. But China is very homogeneous and is historically tends to close itself up, while Russia is the exactly opposite, right? It's always trying to expand, even though it's huge, and it's extremely diverse. There are millions of different nations and peoples inside of Russia. Russia, when what happened with Ukraine is that for Russia, the biggest fear with NATO coming close is this Black Sea area. Is this the fear that they would lose that water, the access to this water? This is like a real problem for in Russia, the way Russia sees itself managing. This is like a huge, by the way, it's distorted, right? Russia looks way thinner in reality, but that water is frozen. It's really cold. You don't want to go anywhere near it. And but Russia has an empire mentality, and it's a very weird mentality. Are they really an empire? The whole area is there are million different nations here. It's the whole management of this area is very interesting and very different. Um, you have you have the Tatars, and you have the and they all have different languages too. Yeah, you have the Czech, like the here in this area, you have the Kafkaz people, very different. In Kazan, this is like this is, I think Kazan is in Tatarstan, right? This is like an Muslim area. Russia is, yeah, Russia has a very interesting kind of situation where it's actually something that is a real old style empire, kind of like the Roman Empire was and the Mongol Empire was, where China managed to become homogeneous. Russia is anything but. It's really old style empire. So you have here two countries that live in a completely different kind of psychology and mindset. And by the way, China right now with its communism, with one things that some of the things that is doing is it completely erasing the history of their own people. And for China, Taiwan was always historically part of China, and it's split, right? So you have the Communistic Party that managed to capture the mainland of China. And of course, you have the Tibetan Plateau, which is an expansion, but doesn't have a lot of people. And it's mostly China did fast, like it repopulated the whole area to make sure it's mostly Chinese everywhere. And Taiwan, which is the old government of China that managed to escape here and is very progressive and very technologically advanced, and is the number one silicon, right, producing. They have like the number one chip producing, I think, country in the world. And for China, that is also kind of a country. They also, both China and Russia, right? They have this drive that is also ego, and part of the Chinese ego is to reclaim Taiwan. But the interesting thing for me when it comes to China is that historically China doesn't have an expansionist mentality per se. It's mostly a homogeneous country. So I'm kind of curious, okay, if they capture Taiwan, what's next? Because it was the Japanese that went inside to China, right? It wasn't always like the Chinese people there are a lot, right? But at some point they decided to close up their country. Those are our borders. They even have this famous Chinese wall. This is how, like, if you have an expansionist mindset, you wouldn't put a wall separating you and the rest of the world if you want to expand. So it's interesting with China in my mind, because they are actually actively changing their own culture. So I wonder, like, what is their goal there? Here, let me go through. I don't know. By the way, thank you for your support. I don't understand how us Hungarians are able to look at our former enemies as friends or family, but many Arabs can't look past the difference between them and Jews and be family or just be friends. Okay, because for Arabs, I'm gonna talk about it. For Arabs, they have to have a complete cultural change to be able to accept Jews as friends, and that cultural change is being forced on them by the Saudi government and the UAE and the Emirates governments. It comes from top to down. It's not the other way around. The people, and in Jordan, I don't know if the king is strong enough to actually change the population, to actually change the mentality of the population. In Saudi and in Emirates, I think maybe yes. I think maybe the royalty there is strong enough to actually change the culture of the Arab population, and I'm gonna talk about it exactly why those countries cooperated with Israel, because those are countries that are trying to, especially Saudi. It's a country that is actively trying to change the mentality of their own population. And so there is a good reason Arabs cannot do that, because that requires a complete cultural change, because they have to go from being Arabs on the original sense of the word, right? Of taking what you can and by living off looting mostly, to being productive. So this is what the Saudis and the Emirates are doing. They're bringing professors from the outside. They've tried to develop technological industries in their countries as much as they can to set themselves free from oil money. They want to change the psychology of their own population to become productive. And a big thing with being able to live and see your Jews not as your enemy is that you cannot be friends with people who are not in your level. You can only be friends with those who sit with you on the same table. And if somebody is still like sitting on the floor and is basically lives in a mentality that is 1,000 years behind, it's gonna be really hard for them to have a common language and common understanding with someone who lives in a productive based mentality and society. So it's not that easy. For Europe, there was this kind of agreement where, okay, we're all moving towards productivity and we're all moving towards merit kind of situation. I see. Thank you for your super chat again. Russia doesn't have an empire mentality. They have no interest in recreating the USSR. All that is biased Russophobic propaganda. Ukraine committed genocide against ethnic, so it retaliated. Listen, I speak Russian, okay? I know Russian and I was in Russia. They have very much that kind of mentality. The Russian dream of conquering Paris is a real thing, okay? The Russians joke about having France turn Russia, and it's like, and if you say something like that, and if you say something like that in Russia, you'd be surprised with how warm of a reception it would get from the Russians. So I wouldn't say it's completely true. And they even they even talked about Alaska used to be part of Russia, for example. So there is also a part of it. They do have an expansion mindset. It is what the Russian Empire was built on, always have been. It's kind of like this, it's the end of the day is like what defines you as a nation, right? And that imperialistic mindset really defines the Russian way of thinking, from my experience. Not all Russians are like that. So, so it's a very, for me, China is a very interesting situation because I'm kind of wondering, are they changing the way they think? Like, what is the Taiwan the only thing they want, and then it will be historical China, or is it like something else like that they want, right? So, like, what the psychology of the people there? In Russia, like, ego is a big part of their psychology. It's not the smartest always. Russian saying. Russian saying, today we retreat, tomorrow we have a tea in Paris. I actually don't remember. Did I hear? I don't know if I heard that. But, uh, Rebecca, who do I think we should fear more, Russia or Iran? That is forever. Hmm, it's interesting. I'm because it's a different kind of imperialism. Because the Iranian one is more likely to be brutal, you know, but the Russian one, in reality, the real thing you should fear is your governments becoming too progressive to defend themselves. That's the biggest fear you should have, because Europe is definitely in technical advantage, is in on geographical advantage, as has all everything, like has a population type advantage and everything. The only thing that it doesn't have an advantage of is their mindset, is their like understanding of like different mentalities, let's say it like that, or understanding a need to expand. They live in a great place in the world on earth, where they have the best geographical location you can ask for in the old world. I'm still in the old world here, because even if with Russia doesn't have the Mediterranean, for example, which is an incredible. First of all, like, people are so much happier when they have somewhere to go and tan. So the Mediterranean is also like an awesome thing that for Russia doesn't have, for example. And the whole area is colder and it's depressive, and then you have something, and like, you know, trying to get to warm places is good enough of a reason sometimes, maybe, to try to conquer places, believe me. Europe has a lot of advantages. Oh, by the way, there is a country that I didn't mention yet. Some I see it brought up in the comments, which is it's a real like wild card, which I want to touch on. So Russian mentality, Chinese mentality, it's an interesting kind of situation. I think the thing with Russia is that the mentality against Russia has to be a combination of strength and respect. Like, make Russia feel like it's respected, and then um, also be sure to be strong enough that Russia wouldn't be like, oh, it's an easy target. Like, if we can have it, why not grab it, right? Like this kind of mentality. Yes, exactly. There is a reason Russian wants, like, the area in Russia here, this Black Sea area is very important to Russia. So let's hear. Welcome, Charlie Lemoyne, to them being a member. Welcome to the club. Oh, here, I can show it like that. Welcome. All right. So what's happening right now, right? Gigi Rider, thank you. Okay, if Israel makes special missiles for Iran, manufacture them out of magical God. I don't know. Yeah, sounds effective. Okay. Tenebris Saint. Ukraine has broad daylight Nazi marches. They aren't innocent. It's a very, the thing with Ukraine, also Russia in general. I have to say that as a Jew, I have a lot of mixed feelings with Russia. It's a very weird situation with Russia, where Jews and Russia are enemies for most of history, 100% of the time. But then Russia saved the Jews when nobody else would several times in history too, like especially in the 20th century. So it's a very weird situation where Russia saved the Jews several times when the Jews were like, okay, that's it for us. And then Russia, for some reason, stepped in. It is a very weird, interesting situation. So when it comes to Russia, I cannot, like in the life of me, like I cannot like hate them. I can't. Like personally, I don't I can't. Like there is a lot of messed up things about Russia, but then I was like, but on the other hand is like as anti-Semitic as Russia is and was, the I'm alive because of Russia. I'm alive because my family that is from the European side, from my mother's side, had Russia to escape to. The most basic thing, and Israel exists because the USSR was the only country that agreed to give it weapons on the most critical hour of the Jewish people in 1948. Weird relationship with Russia. And I have to say, like with Russia, it's a very weird thing. I really feel like a lot with the way that Russia treats Israel has to do with the fact that Israel ideologically has sided itself with the United States of America, which Russia absolutely hates. If Israel could somehow be detached from the West, Russia, like Israel is everything Russia needs for them to do whatever they want. Like Israel is like the exact like puzzle piece that would really help Russia. It's like Israel is what Russia needs, like a puzzle piece, because they have all the resources, but Israel has all the technological power and all the high-tech manufacturing power. If Russia, like if somehow Israel gets cut off from the West, Israel could be the biggest asset Russia could ask for. There are some comments on my makeup, I see. I don't know. I just had fun with makeup today, you guys. Very interesting situation with Russia. It's yeah, right. Don't worry, Ezekiel has nothing to do with Russia, Iran, and the others invading Israel. His prophecy is related. Hmm. Actually, it does have something to do with Persia, but not Russia. If I remember correctly, what you're referring to. Why would Israel go to Russia when they have India? Um, to be, I didn't say Israel would go to Russia. I personally prefer India too. I just said that for Russia, if Israel is somehow cut off the West, that would be like the exactly what they need. The thing, India, everything like that is the resources, right? So whatever, like look at Israel, right? Obviously we have zero land. So everything like metal, everything like that is completely imported. So if we don't have somewhere to get metals, we cannot do anything. When it comes to India, I'm not sure like about what India has in terms of deposits, like of natural resources. I know for sure Russia, like technically, has basically everything. Mhm. No, Alec tribes. Actually, Stalin planned the second Holocaust. Yes, it became completely paranoid. Stalin, what happened in 53? And by the way, Stalin died on Purim. He died on Purim. It was such a such a chef's kiss kind of momentum where uh, a dictator that had decided to was about to execute this command to get rid of all the Jews, died on Purim he had a stroke. But the thing with Stalin is that Stalin was completely insane, and he had severe paranoia, and he wanted to get rid of all the Jews because he was afraid that his doctors want to kill him. And he did the 1+1 thing where he realized that doctors are Jews. So the next logical step was like, okay, if all the doctors are Jews and I'm afraid of doctors, then we should kill all the Jews, obviously, as per usual. Uh, and yes, he did. Yeah, everything was prepared. There are rumors that when those doctors that he was ready to go against could have saved him, kind of chose not to. So yeah, that is something that almost happened. Right. Let's go. By the way, like generally getting rid of the Jews in your country doesn't take you to good places. It makes your country worse on average, usually. Um, yeah, Purim 1953, we got rid of Stalin, thank goodness. All right. So now we can understand that there is unstable situationship here. And yes, so this Islamic Communist Alliance, which is not new at all, and now is controlling the controlling Western universities, is also what led, for example, the Iranic revolution, right? Where the communists and the Islamists decided to join hand in hand, and then they took over the country. And of course, the Islamists got rid of the communists real fast. And ever since then, 1979, Iran is enjoying a very ideologically driven Shia Islamic dictatorship that also drove more Islamization in this area because the automatic response for the Shia getting so much more religious is also the Sunni getting a lot more religious. And another reason for that, especially like in Arab countries, is that they have seen how much farther behind they are compared to the West. And the one logical reason that they realized it's happening is because they weren't Islamic enough, which also created the exact opposite effect of what they thought it would do. But yeah. But they both Islamic and communist mentalities are unproductive in their way of behavior. Like those are unproductive societies. I don't know if you like North Korea when it ran out of money. Pyong, like the leadership in Pyongyang was like, you know what? Let's let 90% of the people starve anyway. It's too hard to manage. Yeah, communism tends to be destructive to their own population really, really fast, because it's all the lower, like the poor attacking the rich, and then the rich are the ones that actually manage the country, and then you get all the chain supplies collapse, and then everybody's starving and dying. With Islam, the rich person is also Muslim, so you can cooperate with them, but this is power-based societies with a lot of as long as they have somewhere to expand, they can take risks from others. But what happens is that when you introduce this mentality, the way you treat women, the way you treat children, the way it's anti-scientific, it's anti-progress, and it's a mentality of entitlement, and therefore the devastating effect is it takes maybe a little bit more time. Like it's immediate for a woman, for example, but it it takes a little bit more time than communism. You don't starve immediately, but that's what happens long term. All those countries like Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, they're all on the brink, like they are on the brink of starvation. But it takes a bit longer because you go outside, right? So, and when you go outside, you have a very interesting situation happening where the outside who doesn't want to deal with you starts throwing money. Be like, you know what? Take money, just leave us alone. That's another thing that happens. All right, let me see if there is any. Mr. K. Nes from Tehran, Ali Khamenei just said, grab your ankles and kiss your diverse trips goodbye. What? Are there news? I have no idea what's going on. Maybe we are attacking in Iran right now and I have no idea. Right now I know that Israel is attacking Hezbollah, which is basically making sure that it would be easier to attack Iran as well, making Hezbollah and Hamas less likely to be able to do anything when we attack Iran. I kind of want to talk about what happened with Iran as well. But yes. So so those two bullshit ideologies, Islam and communism. Oh. I just read the Aisha's goat comment here. You like my I have so much to talk about. Maybe I should do another section talking more specifically on Israel, Iran, and everything that happened. I also like so much those. I don't know. I kind of watched the news and I was thinking it's either that uh, the news outlets are really incompetent and they really the anchors and nobody understands anything about army operations or things like that, and then they ask the most basic questions, those who they bring, or it's like a deliberate attempt by governments to be like, you know what, let's not tell the population how those things really work. And then I was thinking maybe if it's the latter, then maybe I shouldn't talk too much either about what can be done here. But it's all unofficial anyway, so it's okay. So the communists, what they did, which was which is absolutely genius, the Russians, right? They really found a way to infiltrate the West and to mess it up from the inside. Um, by actually, let me just take a break here. Also, because I'm a bit tired, so I'm thinking maybe I should have another live, maybe another time. And I want to kind of maybe just ask me questions a little bit, and then I'll go. Maybe I'll do another session because from here, what I want to talk about is like the mentalities, like the basic mentalities. So that situation where you have an ideological collide, which I believe the real ideological collide is between productive and unproductive societies. And then you have geographical collide, which you have those who are in the green and those who are in deserts. Basically, like the most simple way to you say it. And by the way, Russia is also frozen. So it's sort of a desert. It can also be seen as a desert. Um, and but China, for example, they have water and everything. I don't know what their deal is. It's like, why did they adopt this stupid ideology? They just fell into a stupid ideology. So what did yeah, ideology, geography, and I feel like I said a third thing and I already lost my brains. A question, how many languages do I speak? So I speak fluently Russian, English, Hebrew. Arabic, I do understand. Spanish, um, a bit of Georgian, like a little bit of languages here and there, like a little bit of Georgian, and Arabic. I understand to some level. I would say I would put it fifth. I think like Spanish would be fourth. Da, 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 da. So what I learned some Polish and Italian. Do I speak Italian or German? Oh wait. Haha, you are almost at it. Shh. Hong Kong was already taken, guys. China already took Hong Kong. Where are you? Yeah, but most say 60% of China is actually Tibet. Yeah, but Tibetan plateau is not very inhabitable. It's a very, very harsh environment. It just not really. It's basically most of Chinese live like here in on the green area. Children. Right. What is my? I'm an engineer, by the way. Um, all right. So I kind of want to talk about like more about Israel, Iran, but I kind of want to take a break too. You guys, ask something interesting. You can cover. It's okay. I don't need a cover. Yeah, do your break and come back. You guys gonna be here if I gonna go to a break? Kind of. What would Jews do if they had a country like India? That's a weird question, to be honest. I think the biggest, like a big difference between Hinduism and Judaism is Judaism believes that you have to do everything now, versus Hinduism is like, chill, worst case, you do it next life. It's a bit of a different psychology. I think this is also part of like the geographical, because Israel, the Jews basically developed here, so their psychology is very interesting, the Jewish psychology, because it's a meeting point of civilizations, but it's a desert area. So they had like the touch, like they seen what a civilization can do, building stuff like developing and things like that, but also in a harsh environment. So there's also this meeting with, the uh, what, like, more nomadic mentality where you have to walk around a lot. Uh, I think that's why maybe Judaism is a lot more about the now, because if you live in an area that might have a drought, and that area, like in Israel, we only have rain in the winter. If you don't plan ahead, if you don't live a productive life and you're not nomadic, then you're not going to survive. So you have this very like civilizations, like for example, you have the Egyptian, but they have a river, so it's stable. And you have the Mesopotamian and everything like that. This is the Fertile Crescent, versus this kind of area where it's, on the one hand, it's unreliable when it comes to water. It's a drought is very, very effective when it hits. So it required a lot of innovation and a lot of planning ahead, and there is no room for not doing what you need to do. Let's say it like that. And this is where Judaism developed, versus India, like that is mostly very, very fertile and has a constant flow of water, that also has like an area that has very ancient civilizations around it. So the philosophy that it developed is a lot more, is in a way similar to Judaism, but very different. Maybe because Jews had to work more. So in Judaism, you have a lot more focus on work, on actual like innovation, development, and doing everything like that. Maybe because it was a lot more critical for the Jewish survival, like from a geographical standpoint. it was super important for people to survive in an area like that, to have that type of mentality. What is going? Goy means people. It means nation. So Jews are a goy for necessary, like for in technical terms, right? Usually when Jews say goyim, they mean other nations, but it means people, like other. That's what it means. Like like it says in the Bible that the Jews, like the Israelites, are gonna be a big goy, but we usually say it to refer to other people, not us. But Jews are also a goy. I always thought it meant, yes, the way it's used, like today, usually it means just other people, like not Jewish people, non-Jews. It just like other people. But yeah, it just means people. This, okay, so what do I think is Israel will do to respond to Iran? This is what I want to touch on and start talking about. I also want to talk more about the attack from Iran and all the technical details, as well as like the technological things, but also I would love to explain why you have this regional alliance against Iran and why Europe that likes bashing Israel that much really needs Israel. And but this is why, but it's a lot of topics, and I kind of wanted to maybe take a 10-minute break before I go into that. And also, like, I would also talk about if it's going to lead to a regime change and everything like that, and like that. If irritate will in the nuclear facility or military bases, not necessarily. There are a lot of different options. It might be all of them. Depends on how hardcore Israel decides to go. Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jax. All right, so how are we gonna take the break? Yeah, play a video and then